Yep, I'm here. Thank you for having me today, and thank you everyone for your time. We've definitely heard from a lot of great companies and solutions so far. My goal here in the next half hour is to clarify our specific approach to DRaaS and to address the specific aspects of ransomware protection that are unique to us here at Infrascale. We were founded in 2011. Right now we're active in over 170 countries, and we have 15 globally dispersed data centers around the world. I'll definitely share some more info about us as a company, but to sum it up, I want to share a recent stat. The University of Virginia is one of our customers, and using Infrascale, the amount of time it took the university to fully recover from a ransomware attack was less than 15 minutes. So we guarantee a 15-minute failover from any disaster, large or small, and we can restore operations in minutes with just a few clicks. And that message is really spreading quickly. So in April of this year, we were voted RCP Editor's Choice for Best Ransomware Solution, as well as a Gartner Visionary in the 2016 DRaaS Magic Quadrant. So our solution is getting a lot of attention, and let's go ahead and dive in. So it's been thoroughly discussed throughout the day that, the recent WannaCry ransomware attack infected over 300,000 systems in 150 countries, and that happened in just a few hours. So because of its success infiltrating systems, the ransomware is really inspiring imitators. And what's more is that many people were left with a really false sense of security. They patched their Microsoft systems and then thought that they're no longer at risk. But the reality is that we're all at risk for future attacks. And when we look at that WannaCry attack, the ransom demanded was just $300. But it's not the ransom itself that's so damaging to a business. It's the cost of downtime associated with that attack. So let's look at a few of the numbers. Downtime costs really depend on the size of the organization. And when you factor in operational downtime, staff resources that are needed to resolve the problem, replacement of systems, et cetera, ransomware is costing businesses more than $75 billion per year. And with WannaCry alone, even a conservative estimate of $1,000 per hour of downtime, that resulted in over $800 million in downtime and lost productivity, and that's just from WannaCry alone. Now, the other growing problem with ransomware is the fact that nearly anybody can get their hands on it. So the barrier to entry is lowered, and it makes cybercrime available to nearly anyone. And hackers realized, right, that ransomware is cheap to purchase and download. It has a quicker payout than other types of theft. And it has a lower risk of being caught because of that anonymity of Bitcoin. So with the rise of ransomware as a service, negotiating with hackers has become sort of a business in and of itself. Reports show that 3 out of 4 cyber hackers are willing to negotiate the ransom fee. And we now see things like web pages offering advice to hackers. We see ransomware customer service for victims who have questions. And we see phone lines set up for help with making payments. Now, in this example here, a city police department in Mississippi experienced a ransomware attack similar to this. They were offered a free decryption trial. But even after the ransom payment was made to get the data back, they received only half their data and a message from the hackers demanding another payment for the other half. So we understand the threat and the risks associated with ransomware. Well, where do we go from here? The best approach to ransomware is three-pronged. Companies really need a comprehensive data protection plan that addresses security best practices a few different ways. So yes, regular patching, AV protection, and cloud backup are all part of the plan, but that's not really good enough on their own. So you also need to train users on how to recognize phishing attacks and suspicious links or attachments. And you need to have a mitigation plan to be able to isolate the infection when it hits and utilize a disaster recovery as a service solution to quickly recover your files and running systems when you get infected. So part of this DRaaS defense is to have a good backup of that data and be able to roll back to a date before the ransomware hit. And so here at InfraScale, we're going beyond just traditional backup and DR, and we introduced what we call anomaly detection. So what we're doing with anomaly detection is monitoring the backup activity and looking at the patterns of data change. So in other words, we're just looking at how frequently the data is changing. And when ransomware goes through your system, it modifies all the files that it touches. So if it's a file that you're backing up, we're going to recognize it as a changed file. And then in this analysis, we monitor the normal number of changed files per day. And if we suddenly see a spike where a much larger number of files has been changed, then that alert gets released. So we can proactively see the threat of data encryption by hackers before the ransom has ever even been posted or demanded. Now, this is really important because most of the solutions out here today don't have this proactive warning system in place. So most are going to tell you that they can't detect it, they can only remediate it, but we're able to do both. So now let's get into some of the DRaaS details. I know that's what we came here for today, and I'm going to try to move quickly here as we're limited on time, but I want to cover as much as possible. So here at InfraScale, our mission is to eradicate downtime and data loss. We know that traditional approaches to backup simply just don't work against ransomware. So let's see exactly how InfraScale DRaaS works. All right, InfraScale DRaaS is going to let you quickly fail over your systems, and it supports DR to be on demand. So here's a scenario. In this situation, here are the end users. They're working on their production systems, and unknown to them, they're about to experience a ransomware attack. Now, this is an instance where we've installed the InfraScale disaster recovery solution. So it's a hybrid cloud solution. You have an on-premise failover appliance installed locally, and that could be a virtual appliance or a physical appliance. And then a cloud-based service, like would run on any public, private, or even the InfraScale cloud. So what we do is capture all of the systems to the appliance. We dedupe them to compress the amount of data that's stored. We replicate those systems up to the cloud. And then if just one system were to go down, the admin could fail over to the local appliance and bring back that most recent replica of that system, and the users can continue to work with that application or that server. But here, of course, we're going to assume that there's a site-wide outage due to ransomware or any other macro disaster. So the local appliance is not available. But that's okay. We can fail over to the cloud. We can bring back a full virtual environment that replicates exactly what was on-premise. And now the users can continue working by interacting with those cloud-based systems. And with on-demand failover, you can log in from any browser. So even if you're on a laptop, a tablet, or a smartphone, you have access to the dashboard to do this. This way, everyone keeps working. We've instantly recovered a clean version of that entire environment, not just the files and folders. And that whole process happens in 15 minutes or less, guaranteed. So let's take a closer look at backup versus DRaaS. When dealing with ransomware threats, we know that time is your worst enemy. So the faster you can detect it, the more time you have to take action and restore your databases and mission-critical apps. So simple backup procedures are going to take significantly longer than a modern DRaaS solution. If we're looking at the top here, we see cloud backup. 4 to 5 hours is a best-case scenario here. And part of the reason is that when it comes to restoring applications and production databases from a backup, it requires a lot of planning and coordination. So if you have just a backup system in place, you need to first find a clean point from which to restore. You need to get hardware to recover to, set up the machine, recover all that data. You need to test it for viability. And if it's not viable, you need to start over again and before you're able to restore to production. But if you look at the bottom, we see DRaaS. If you have a DRaaS system, then you can simultaneously cloud boot multiple versions of the same machine. So that will let you determine the safe version to recover. And then you can boot either to the cloud, a virtual environment, or recover to production hardware. So the total downtime with DRaaS with Infrascale is about 1 to 2 minutes. And it's saving you a ton of time and money because of the simplicity of these steps. So it includes built-in failover orchestration that lets you create predetermined failover plans. And those can be scheduled to boot simultaneously or in a specific order. We're going to take a closer look at that in just a moment. But rather than talk through it, I want to give a specific example. So this is a tale of 2 ransomware victims. In November of last fall, these 2 businesses got infected with ransomware within the same week. Now, their experiences were very, very different because of the underlying infrastructure and all the safeguards that they had in place. Now, the first company is a retailer, and the IT admin realized they'd been infected with ransomware and noticed that the files were inaccessible. They'd been encrypted. So they determined how many PCs were infected and started scanning the network, but it was really difficult for them to identify the point of entry of that malware. Plus, on top of that, the on-site backup was infected with the malware too. So that prevented a recovery. And they didn't have a DRaaS solution in place, so they had to restore clean files from a secondary SAN, and they had to do that 1 file at a time. So because of this, they were only semi-operational within 2 to 3 days. Their email and ERP systems were up and running in about 48 hours, but the non-mission critical apps and the file shares, those weren't fully restored for another 2 weeks. Now, if we look, on the other hand, at the second company, it was a manufacturer that was infected with ransomware the very next day. And this spread when a finance clerk clicked on an email attachment, just mistakenly assumed that it was an invoice that needed to be paid. So the malware in that case spread like wildfire. Almost 500,000 files were encrypted in less than 6 minutes. Now, the difference is that they were able to pinpoint the machine that had been infected, scan the PCs and servers on the network, and determine the extent of the infection. So they began recovering clean versions of infected files, actually spin up VMs of the backups from the local on-prem appliance instead of manually restoring files one at a time. So they were able to restore the infected file servers, email, and ERP within 5 minutes using Infrascale disaster recovery. Let's look a little bit more at the specifics of our solution. Like I mentioned when we got started, Infrascale guarantees system failover from any disaster in 15 minutes or less, and we're able to do that at a fraction of the cost of other BDRs. And we do this using intelligent software. We have built-in global deduplication, compression, and WAN acceleration technologies. We have eliminated expensive hardware. You can simply bolt on an unlimited amount of cloud space for long-term storage, and that's using intelligent cloud spillover. And our solution is a monthly low-cost subscription. It's all based on the number of terabytes protected. So you only pay for what you protect. Now, we offer 2 solutions here, Infrascale Cloud Backup and Infrascale Disaster Recovery, just to take a quick look at either solution. Infrascale Cloud Backup on the left here, it's a direct-to-cloud solution oriented around data and bare metal image backup. So it's typically for endpoint data protection for laptops, mobile devices, and it's really optimized for small to medium businesses and their servers, and also maybe remote or branch offices. Now, Infrascale Disaster Recovery on the right, it's a hybrid cloud solution. So it includes an on-premise component like we saw earlier and the cloud as well. So of course you can back up that data, but it goes further in capturing full system images and allowing you to boot and run those images on a local appliance or in the cloud, depending on what you need. So we've already done all the work behind the scenes in order to prepare those images and ensure that those images can run in the cloud, even though they were originally installed and running on a local physical server. Let's take a look at the process here. So at a high level, let's just look from the bottom up. we're seeing infrascale cloud backup and infrascale disaster recovery. Now, the next layer up here, we see the source system that we're trying to protect, whether Windows or Linux or Unix systems, VMware, Hyper-V, or KVM. In either case, there's going to be an agent installed. So either a software agent on the machine, or in the case of virtual environments, with VMware, it could be a direct connection to the API, or with Hyper-V, it would be a host level or hypervisor level agent. Okay, and then we're going to capture those systems, and in the case of cloud backup, we're going to dedupe and directly send it to the cloud of your choosing. And in the case of DR, we're going to capture the systems to an on-premise appliance, dedupe there, and then replicate that data to the cloud. So you have 2 copies of that data. Now, regardless, everything is administered through our central web-based dashboard. You can log in from any browser, even a tablet, a smartphone, or any laptop. And in that dashboard, you can also access the orchestration policies and procedures that I mentioned just a minute ago. So let's take a closer look at that orchestration process. So one of the key differentiators in any DR solution is going to be how to deliver orchestration. And you want the orderly recovery of a server environment. That's going to ensure that critical servers and applications and devices all come online in the proper sequence based on their previous dependencies. So our latest release introduced this visual designer that you can see here for drag and drop orchestration. And within the dashboard under the boot tab, you'll see a page for this orchestration. You'll see on the left that list of bootable machines, and then you can drag them over into the diagram design surface. So from there, you can rearrange them. You can add wait times if you want delays between boots, and you can create boot groups to run if some machines are more critical than others and you want to separate them there. You can also specify network configuration settings for these machines. So if you look at that LAN configuration tab there, you click in there and you can specify the subnet, gateway, DNS servers, DHCP range. You can also enable or disable outbound internet access. So no matter which solution you choose, it's just really important to understand exactly how that solution plans to fail over and then also fail back. So in addition to how much customization and control you have in the whole orchestration process. So just again, regardless of who you choose for DR, just keep that in mind. Those are really important questions that you want to be asking your provider and know how much control you have over the whole process. Now, with all this in mind, let's look at the actual recovery times for infrascale protected systems. This is a cloud boot histogram, and it shows historical data for the actual recovery time for every system recovered by infrascale disaster recovery. Now, you can see each date shown. For each date on the x-axis, there's a green and a red bubble. So the green bubble represents systems successfully recovered, and the red bubble shows systems that aren't recovered, meaning they didn't boot successfully. Now, if there's no bubble that day, then there simply were no systems recovered on that day. And then the size of the bubble corresponds to the number of systems that were recovered. And the position on the y-axis shows the average time that it took to recover all the systems on that day. And this is available live on our website. We published this. It's available at infrascale.com/cloudboot-histogram. And you can mouse over each bubble to see the actual number of systems and the recovery time available there. Now, also for those of you interested in hearing about encryption and our security process there, here's a look at our encryption system. We do take security very seriously. Your data is encrypted at 256-bit AES locally, and then it's sent over an SSL and encrypted again at 256-bit AES at rest. Now, if you do want to take it a step further, you can. With UltraSafe Max, you can not only define the password, but you can define the encryption key itself as well. And of course, this comes into play with compliance. So if you need to comply with any regulatory frameworks, All of our data centers comply with HIPAA, SSAE 16, FINRA, SOX, CGIS, many other regulations as well. All of our data centers are Tier 3 and Tier 4 military-grade data centers. So again, really important where no matter which vendor you choose, you do want to make sure that if you have these regulatory frameworks, that you want to make sure that the vendor has that compliance factor built in. Now, our approach, I mentioned early on, I just wanted to get into a little bit more detail, is really getting a lot of attention. Gartner named us the 2015 Cool Vendor in Business Continuity and Disaster Recovery. And in 2016, they named us the Visionary in Disaster Recovery as a Service. And you can see Infrascale is right at the very top of this Visionary quadrant. Now, keep in mind, this Magic Quadrant was released around June of last year. So make sure to keep your eyes peeled for the 2017 version. That's going to be coming out in about the next month or so. So keep your eyes peeled for that. Okay, a few of our key differentiators before we dive into the Q&A. Since I know that this would likely come up in the Q&A, we stand out in the DRaaS space in some notable ways. These are just a few of them. So protected system coverage, which I did mention, our leading 15-minute guarantee. And then we also publish our benchmarks. We publish our actual RTOs achieved by our customers. That's the failover histogram that we just looked at. Our orchestration process, so we provide runbooks, custom scripting to automate that whole orchestration process. We developed that drag and drop orchestration interface. Our automatic network rebuild, so we can rebuild the entire network automatically and on the fly using software-defined networking technology. And then also, Infrascale offers that subscription pricing model that I briefly mentioned. Now, with this, all of the hardware, software, networking, support, onboarding, it's all included without any extra costs. And then finally, we offer unlimited use. You have unlimited DR testing and events, so you can make use of that at any point in time. Now, with that, we are going to dive into the Q&A next. So I'll pass it over to David. We have one quick poll before we jump into the Q&A.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Carla. Let me go ahead and pop up that poll question, and we'll just leave that on the screen while we do the Q&A. The poll question is, would you like to learn more about disaster recovery as a service from Infrascale? So there's a number of Infrascale choices up there: disaster recovery, cloud backup, or DR and cloud backup, or not interested at this point. So I'll just leave that up, and we've got a lot of questions here from the audience. So the first one, Carla, is do you offer endpoint protection? I know a lot of the ransomware comes in from endpoints.
Yes, thanks for diving in here. And now I do want to introduce Brian, our sales engineer, who is on the line for any, get your most technical questions in, and we will be able to answer those for you. Brian, are you there?
I am present.
Great. So could you repeat that question quickly?
Yeah, so the question is, do you offer endpoint protection?
So the answer to that question is yes, for both products. Although I will say that the Infrascale Cloud Backup product, the direct-to-cloud product, is a bit more geared towards endpoints than the DRaaS product is. Both have the ability to protect endpoints.
Excellent, excellent. Another question here is about, what about self-service? Is Infrascale self-service, or do you have to declare a disaster?
That's a great question. One of our key differentiators is that you do not have to declare a disaster in order to be able to fail over. You can simply go into the cloud, spin up your machines, and do your failover without even asking permission to do so. So that makes it a little bit easier on the users who maybe need to get back to work right away. You don't have to wait for us to say, oh, okay, now you have the resources, now you can do it. You can spin up whenever.
Cool, cool. What about, do you offer any sort of guarantee on your failover?
So we do offer a 15-minute SLA on our failover capabilities, but usually the machines boot faster than that. I've seen machines boot in as little time as 30 seconds.
Wow. Okay. Someone else here is asking, do we have to pay for disaster recovery tests, or is there some sort of limit?
So there is no limit. One of the things that we do kind of pride ourselves on is that you could do daily failover tests, and there's no extra charge for that.
Awesome. What about the pricing model? How does that work?
So that might be more up Carla's alley to answer.
Yep, so the pricing is simply based on the amount of data that you have to protect. And so it's simply based on the number of terabytes. You only pay for what you protect. And for that question as well, I'm happy to put you in touch with one of our account managers to see what your environment is like and how much data you have.
Okay. Another question here that came in, they're asking about how do you spin up the virtual machines? Do you spin those up in the cloud or on the appliance or both?
So we can actually spin up on both, although it is worth mentioning that the local appliance is usually a little bit smaller and designed for small-scale failover, like maybe a few machines have failed, but the rest of the site is okay. The local appliance is designed to handle that, whereas the cloud, much more robust, can spin up many more machines for much larger scale failovers.
Okay. And they're asking here, can you tell me the benefits of orchestration? How does that work?
So the big benefits of orchestration within our product specifically and the way we've designed it is that it's a very simple drag and drop UI that allows you to create groups of machines that may be related to each other. So you may create a primary group, which would be your domain controllers, and you may create a secondary group, which could be Exchange SQL Web, and then you would create a tertiary group that might be your terminal servers. And the idea behind this is that these groups allow you to not only separate those machines out in terms of their roles, but also allow you to create dependencies. Domain controllers and Active Directory servers are obviously required for Exchange, and terminal servers may be something that you bring up tertiary in case it's needed. On top of this, orchestration also allows you to control certain networking aspects to either make those systems accessible or inaccessible through wide area network connections.
Okay. What about scaling? Like, where does InfraScale start, on SMBs, and how large does it scale up to?
So I think the sweet spot would probably be anywhere from, I'd say 20 to 40 terabyte environments, but we go as small as 2 terabyte environments and we go as large as 160 plus terabyte environments, and we can always put multiple devices in place to scale even larger. But I would say the sweet spot is definitely the SMB with between 500 to 1,000 employees, maybe a little bit larger than that. But at the same time, the other sweet spot, because of recent hardware updates, puts us into that enterprise space where we can do 5,000, 10,000 employee businesses as well.
Got it. And then this person is asking about compatibility. Like, does it just work with vSphere or endpoint devices, or what level of compatibility do you offer?
Sure. So we do tie directly into VMware through the vStorage APIs, and that's going to be 4.x to 6.x. So pretty much most of the versions of VMware that are out there that are relatively modern are going to be covered. We do also support Hyper-V 2008 and Hyper-V 2012. That's also going to be integrating directly into the application itself. You do require an agent on the Hyper-V host, but the guests can still be captured agentlessly. And then we do also offer software agents that can be installed for the protection of physical machines or virtual machines that may have specific application requirements. So the way I like to say it is that it can protect heterogeneous environments, including being able to support other operating systems like AIX, HPUX, Linux, and things like that.
Okay. Excellent. Well, great great demo, or great presentation, I'm sorry. I think that's all the time we have for questions. Thanks for being on today, Carla.
Thank you for having us.